بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. After praising Allah Ta'ala and sending salutations upon Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we ask Allah Ta'ala to grant us beneficial knowledge which will bring us more closer to Him and gain us His pleasure. Ameen Ya Rabbil Alameen. And we make dua for all of you that Allah bless you all and your families. Today we will be doing the things that are disliked in the prayer. The author here lists a huge list of 32 things that are disliked during prayer. Some of them are going to be disliked prohibitively, so it's going to be makruh tahrimi, close to haram, and some will be disliked tanzihi, mildly disliked. If you see your footnote, under most of them he does highlight which ones are the tahrimi and which ones are the tanzihi. So I'm not going to mention all of them. It's there for the footnote for anyone that wants to see that. Then we will move on to the things that will be permissible in the prayer. So things that a person is allowed to do in the prayer, we will talk about that. And we will also move on to things that a person is allowed to do, to pray and, to do in the prayer. Then we will talk about when is it permissible to break the prayer, or when is it necessary to break the prayer. Then abandoning prayers, we'll talk about the sin, or a person should not be abandoning prayer and what the implications of abandoning prayer are. And then we'll talk about praying on a riding animal, and obviously that will then correlate onto praying on any sort of vehicle, any sort of transport, whether it be an aeroplane, a ship, a boat, or a train, or anything like that, or car, so a coach. All of these rulings will come into there. And then we will start off the prayer of the traveler. We'll do a little bit on that too. I think this is the amount that we'll get through this time. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi wahdah wa salatu wa salamu ala man la nabiyya ba'dah. So we now start this session with the things that are disliked in the prayer, the makruhat. So the first one is to deliberately omit any mandatory wajib or sunnah act. So if a person deliberately, purposefully leaves out a wajib, mandatory wajib action, or a sunnah action, then this will be disliked. Now obviously if a person leaves out a more important mandatory wajib action, then this will be reprehensible, this will be severely disliked, will leave the prayer also necessitating a repeat, meaning it would be wajib for a person to repeat that prayer. But leaving out a sunnah will not mean that a person is wajib for them to repeat the prayer. It doesn't mean that, but leaving out a sunnah, generally speaking, will lead to a mild dislike, meaning a makruh tanzihi being done. Or sometimes it couldn't even be lower than that. It could be just a wrong that a person has done, something wrong, not necessarily sinful. But leaving out a wajib action would lead to, generally speaking, will lead to something prohibitively disliked, makruh tahrimi. So that's a general rule in that. Then number two is to fiddle around, which is to do abath, like he mentions in the brackets. So fiddle around with one's garment or body. So if a person is playing with the beard, I've explained previously, or a person plays around with their clothing, keeps straightening them and doing whatnot. Yeah, so playing with the clothing, playing with the body, or playing with anything else, the carpet or anything else that a person is playing with, without excessive movement. As obviously, because excessive movement will invalidate the prayer. So a person does not do excessive movement, but less than excessive movement. This will make the prayer disliked. Number three is to wipe away pebbles on the ground except once for prostration. So if a person is praying on some pebbly or ground which has a lot of things that may poke the head when going down into sujood, then for once a person just wipes that sajda area, the prostration area, and then prostrates on it. And every time they just carry on doing prostration on it, they don't wipe anymore. They only wipe once. Then this is fine. Wiping once is excusable. But wiping every time, this is beyond that a person needs to wipe. So this is going to now lead to dislike. Number 4 is to crack one's knuckles. So cracking knuckles, just cracking the fingers and things like this. This is again disliked, because a person should not be doing these things in the prayer. To place one's hands on one's hips. So a person doesn't fold their hands, but they place their hands on the hips. So this is again disliked. To turn one's neck, so to turn the head away from the qibla, to turn away looking this way or that way, is going to lead to makruh tahrimi, again dislike. Number 7, to sit with one's knees up. So sitting in a way whereby the knees are up, the legs are going to be obviously up, and instead of sitting with the legs flat. So this is again makruh. Now number 8, to lay one's forearms on the ground during prostration. Now this is obviously for a man to place the forearms onto the ground. This would be disliked, because in the hadith, like I explained, the Prophet said, do not place your arms onto the ground like a dog. So this is for the man. He should not be doing this. Number 9, to roll up one's sleeves. So you're rolling up the sleeves. So if you've got sleeves, rolling the sleeves up and praying in a way whereby you've rolled the sleeves up, however much you've rolled them up. So a person should not do this, because you generally roll your sleeves up when you're going to fight somebody. So are you like standing there to fight somebody? That's not what you're doing here. So you should stand in a very respectable manner. So you do not roll your sleeves up. If your sleeves are already rolled up for wudu, then you roll them down. If a person started the prayer whilst the sleeves are rolled up, then in prayer, without excessive movement, if a person rolls the sleeves down, that's better. But if a person has short sleeves, t-shirt or short sleeve jubba, whatever else it may be, and the arms or the elbows and things are exposed, this is no problem. The problem is rolling the sleeves up. That's what the problem is, not having short sleeves. Short sleeves is no problem at all. Number 10, for men to pray in only a lower garment, meaning that covers the nakedness. So a person prays in only a lower garment, whether it be a wrap, waist wrap, or whether it be some sort of trousers or tracksuit bottoms or long shorts or something like this. If a person's praying in anything which covers their aura, which covers the nakedness, so they can technically pray with the chest bare, but is disliked to pray like this. So whilst having the ability to cover the whole body, that's only if a person has the ability to cover the body. So if you don't have anything else to wear, it's the only thing you have to wear, then it's fine, because then there's a valid excuse. Number 11, to gather one's garment close to the body before going into prostration. So when you're going into prostration, some people like to wrap their clothing and then go into prostration. So this is something again disliked. The person should not be wrapping their clothing and making themselves tight fit, basically. Number 12, to place a shawl on one's head or shoulders, letting its ends hang down below. So you place like a shawl or scarf or anything on the shoulders or on the head, right? And then it hangs down. It hangs down, the ends of it hang down. So either you place the scarf going down from the head, the ends are hanging down, or you place it around the shoulders, around your neck and shoulders, and it hangs going downwards, and it's not tied at the end. So this is called saddle, hanging something like this. The two ends of it are hanging down the shoulders. This is disliked, because obviously this distracts. When you go into ruku, it's going to hang and everything else. So the way to solve this problem is to wrap it, so to get the end and throw it on the other shoulder. As long as a person has done that, that will take out this will no longer be makruh anymore. So even one end, put it onto the shoulder, onto the other side, that is a wrapped thing now, is no longer hanging anymore loosely. But if you put both ends, that's fine as well. So you get these scarves that I'm wearing on my head. You can see the Arabs generally wear the scarf going down, and if you leave it hanging just like that, then it will be makruh. So what you should do is you place one end onto one shoulder, the other end onto the other shoulder. If a person feels that every time I go into ruku, it keeps coming out, and I have to keep doing that every rak'at, then you can do something which the Arabs do. You fold it, you fold it, and you place it onto the top of the head. And you fold it and you put it on top of the head like that. Because of the friction, it stays. And you may see some Arabs doing this even during prayer. So you may think that that looks funny, but they do it because they want to stay away from this dislike here that is mentioned. So this is from the hadith that Prophet mentioned. Don't have something hanging in this manner from the shoulders, or so therefore we don't hang anything like this. So the same applies to any scarf or anything like that. So just take it off is the best thing, put it on the side and pray in this manner. But if a person wants to keep it on, no problem, just wrap it or tuck it in. You've got a jumper or something on top or a coat on top, then tuck it in, and then inshallah that will also take away the dislike. So that's number 12. Number 13, to close one's eyes. So praying with eyes closed, this is disliked. But if there is a valid reason, like there's too much distraction or something like that, then a person is allowed to close the eyes. To yawn, again, yawning is disliked. So that's why you should try to cover close the mouth as much as possible, control it. And the least a person can do is cover the mouth. Number 15, to stretch one's arms, exposing the chest. So when a person is trying to get rid of the tiredness, you stretch your arms out up on top and you do a stretch. So this is what he's talking about. Doing this would be makruh tanzihi, would be lightly disliked. Number 16, to cover one's nose and mouth except when yawning. So covering the mouth and nose, keeping it closed, obviously makes it seem as though you find something smelly or something around. But there's nothing wrong here. If there's nothing wrong, there's no real excuse as to why you're covering it, then covering it will be disliked. But like people may have just gone through face mask time. So obviously for a valid reason, a person is allowed to cover the nose and the mouth, and it will not lead to any dislike. Then number 17, to prostrate with the forehead covered. So having the forehead covered with some cloth or something like this, and then prostrating in this manner. But if a woman is praying with a face covering on, and her forehead is covered, and she's praying because she's praying in a place where people can see her, public place, then praying in this manner is absolutely no problem with it. It's only when there is no need. So generally these last ones that we are mentioning that are lightly disliked, the dislike will go away if there is a valid reason why a person is violating these. Number 18, to prostrate on a picture of a animate creature. So you have on the floor, on a rug, on a mat, whatever it may be that you're praying on, you have a picture of an animal. If there's pictures of animals or animate creatures, then praying on this will be disliked again, because it makes it seem as though you're worshipping that, but you're not worshipping that. Your intention is not to do that. Number 9 is to pray in a road, or to pray on a road, lavatory, or the graveyard. So praying in these three places. On a road, why? Is because obviously if you pray on a road, you're going to be a nuisance to the people passing by, or you're going to be the cause of them crossing you whilst you're praying, and that's obviously leading to sin. So this will be disliked for you to do this, because you didn't put a barrier in front of you. If you place a barrier in front of you, then that will be fine. Praying on a road will be no problem anymore, unless you're causing a nuisance for people to pass. You don't pray on the actual road, pray on the side. Then praying in a lavatory, that's obvious why. It's generally not a clean place. And then they're praying in a graveyard, again, because it will make people see, it will make the onlookers think that you are worshipping the graves there, or something. You're praying to the people in the graves. So yeah, so these are reasons as to why you do not pray in these areas. Number 20, to pray near filth. So if there's filth around, to pray near there is obviously disliked here. 21, to pray on stolen property, in a stolen garment, or after having made wudu from stolen water. So any three of them. So praying on stolen property, usurped property, Likewise, to pray in stolen garments, or to pray, once you have done wudu with stolen water. So all of these things are disliked. Number 22, he mentions to pray whilst having the urge to urinate or defecate. So you need to go to relieve yourself, and you're preventing yourself from doing this. This will be disliked. Or while needing to relieve oneself from gas. So a person needs to let wind pass, and it controlling themselves, and this will be obviously disliked. The more the urge maybe, the more the dislike will be. 23, to pray in work clothes. So what work clothes here refers to is clothes which are generally going to be dirty, not necessarily impure, but just dirty clothing, maybe smelling of sweat, or of BO, or whatever, anything else, or just generally dirty clothing. But if a person is in their work clothes, which is nice, neat clothing, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Number 24, to pray in a garment on which there is a picture of an animate creature. So if there's a picture of an animate creature on the garment, to pray in that garment is again disliked. Number 25, to pray with one's head uncovered unless done out of humility. So the head should be covered, okay? And if the head is uncovered, then it will be disliked, unless a person does this out of humility, or a person does this for another valid reason. Number 26, to pray when food has been served. So the food is already being served on the table, or on the dastarkhan, and you are now starting prayer, because the food should not be waiting for you. And not only that, but your thoughts will be constantly on the food. Number 27, to pray in the presence of a picture of an animate creature. So in the presence of it, so around you, on the side, on the wall in front, on the wall on the right, in the presence, not just in front of you, on top of you, in your presence there is a picture of an animate creature. So that's slightly different to the one that we prayed at 24, and the one that we prayed previous to that even. Number 25, to pray with one's, no, sorry, we did that. Number 28, should I say, to pray around that which would distract a person. So praying around anything that distracts you, this would be disliked. Number 29, if you can't help it, again, if there's children, you can't help it, you have to look after them, then that's different, obviously. Then the dislike will go away. Number 29, to pray in a congregation while standing alone in a row. So you're now joining a congregation, there's no spaces in front of you, so you made a new row at the back. And behind the rows that are in front of you, you are praying in a new row, and you're praying alone, you have got nobody else joining you, then this will be disliked. So the way to get away from this dislike is, nowadays, especially in our countries, there is plenty of space for one person to squeeze in the front. So you just find somebody that you know, kind of, and you can squeeze in between them two. It's fine, because they know you, so you just squeeze in between. I'm sure they can make some space, because people like to stand really spaced apart nowadays. So you can make space in the row in front of you. Otherwise, you wait for somebody to join you. You can see somebody's coming in, you wait for them to join you, and then you start the prayer together with them. If you're going to miss that rak'at, then obviously you started the prayer, then for the duration where you are alone, it's going to be makruh for you until somebody comes and joins you. Otherwise, if you've got another choice, then you pull somebody back. You've got no space in front, you've got nobody joining you, you pull somebody from in front of you, you pull them back, you tap them on the shoulder. You not pull them literally, because they'll fight you maybe, but what you do, you tap them on the shoulder, hopefully they understand and they move back. And you try to do that from the end of the rows, so that you don't leave a gap in front of you in the middle of the row. So this is what the solution to this would be. Number 30, to pray in front of a furnace or ember. So pray in front of a fire that is burning, because then it seems as though you're worshipping this fire. 31, to pray in front of people sleeping. So people are sleeping, to pray in front of them is like as if you're worshipping them. 32, to wipe dirt or sweat off one's face that does not distract him during the prayer. So you're sweating and you're like wiping off sweat, or you're wiping off dirt from your body, from your hands, or your face, like this. So you shouldn't be doing all of this. because your concentration should be on the prayer and not on these things. So these are the disliked actions during prayer. Now moving on, things that are permissible in the prayer. So this is to clarify, just in case a person thinks that this may be disliked or this may be break a person's prayer. It's not like that. It says it is recommended for one to place a barrier in front of him or in front of her when praying. So you place a barrier, something to block in front of you. If someone passes in front of him, he may take the dispensation of saying Subhanallah or gesturing in order to ward off the passerby. So whilst I am praying, I have been given the authority to say aloud Subhanallah to make the person alert that I am praying, or I gesture to them, I put my hand out that I am praying, not hit them, but I put my hand out that I am praying so they can see that I am praying. Or alternatively, if you're praying, if you're in qiyam and you're standing up, you can start reciting what you're reciting aloud. Maliki yawmiddin, iyyaka na'budu. You just read it out loud so they can hear that you actually are praying, so they would not cross you. So the person should not cross, somebody who is praying. So you can use this dispensation. If someone passes in front of a woman praying, she may ward him off, yet without raising her voice. So she can still ward him off, but she will do it with gesture, or she may even cough or something, but she cannot raise her voice and say out what we said, Subhanallah, or start reciting aloud. She will not do that. So placing the barrier in front of you, this is something which is recommended. If you know that it's a place where people will cross, this is a place that people pass by, then it is even more important that a person places the barrier there. Because if you don't place the barrier there, remember, somebody crossing will get a sin. Now, if you do not place the barrier there, you will also get a sin because you neglected that, because you engaged them in a sin, which is that they crossed you, and they did that because you did not put a barrier there. So you should put a barrier there. Now, what is the barrier that should be placed in front of you? So it's the size. The minimum is in terms of its height. It should be the amount of a person's forearm. So length of your forearm. So around about 50 centimeters, we would say. So length of a person's forearm from elbow to the hand. Some people say all the way up to the tips. So just around about 45 to 50 centimeters, half a meter perhaps. That much height it should have. And the thickness of the object that's placed there, it should be one finger's thickness. So the thickness of one finger in terms of its width. And so the width could be like that, and the height could be like this. So you can just put one stick, which is the thickness of the finger. You place that stick in front of you, and you place it into the ground if you can make it stand. And the height of it we talked about. So this is the object that should be placed in front of a person whilst praying. Now, if it's a open space or a big masjid, then you can cross somebody from in front of them. Ideally, you want to be crossing beyond 2 rows or 3 rows in front of them. Enough that if they are looking at the sunnah position, if they're looking with concentration on the sunnah position, the person passing by will not come in their peripheral view. They will not be able to see that person passing by. So that will probably be about 2 or 3 rows in front of you when you're looking properly with concentration, focused on that position. Not that you're looking there, but you're focused up there. So if you're focused up there, then you're going to be able to see much more. But you want to be focused on the position where you're meant to look at, the position of sajda. And if you're doing that, you will not be able to see beyond 2 or 3 rows. If you get somebody to cross by, you won't be able to see when they've crossed. So this is when you can cross. If it's a smaller masjid, the person should not cross. And there's a hadith that if a person knew the sin for crossing somebody, then they would have waited for 40. So the Prophet ﷺ said that they would have waited for 40. He didn't mention 40 what? 40 hours, 40 days, 40 minutes, 40 weeks, 40 whatever it is, 40 years. So what it is, but you can understand the graveness of this, that it is better that a person would be staying there for perhaps 40 years if they knew the sin of crossing this person passing by. So it is quite grave to cross a person. You should not cross the person. So that's that, a recommended action, to place the barrier in front of you. Then it says the following things in the ritual prayer are not disliked: to fasten one's belt around the waist. So if your belt is getting loose, so you fasten the belt, or if it's not a belt, a tie or something that you've fastened your lower garment with. So to fasten that is fine if it's coming off, but playing around with it will go into the makruh actions if you're playing with it. Number two, to strap a sword or the like on the belt. So you've got the first one, to fasten one's belt around the waist, that's just talking about not actually fastening it in the prayer. Okay, so you fastened it from before, but to keep that belt on is what he's talking about. Yes, so keeping this belt on in prayer is fine. You don't have to take the belt off, and that's what he's talking about. Number two is to strap a sword around one's belt, to put a sword there. You don't have to take that sword off and pray. You can keep the sword on. Likewise, you can keep other things, other weaponry on as well, as long as its movement is not distracting. If it's constantly something you have to keep playing around with to go into sujood, to go into ruku and things, you have to move it to go into sujood, then obviously it's best to then take it off. Number three is to pray facing a copy of the Quran. So there's a copy of the Quran in front of you, you're praying facing towards that is perfectly fine. Likewise, to pray facing a sword, you've got a sword in front of you, that's fine as well. And likewise, the back of someone sitting. So you've got somebody sitting facing towards the Qibla as well, and you're facing the back of that person, that's perfectly fine. Even if speaking quietly, so even if this person in front of you is speaking quietly with somebody else. Likewise, to pray whilst there's a candle in front of you or a lamp in front of you, this is all fine because these flames are small and it won't seem as though you're worshipping them. Number four is to kill a snake or scorpion if one fears their harm. So if there's a snake going by and you fear that it will harm you, likewise a scorpion will harm you, then to kill it with no more than 2 strikes. So you can't do more than 2 strikes. So you killed it in 1 strike or you killed it in 2 strikes, that's fine. But if you had to do more than 2 strikes, your prayer will then break. Even with turning away from the Qibla. So you had to turn away from the Qibla and hit it and then go back again. That would be perfectly fine. But excessive movement a person should not do. Just 2 strikes only, maximum. It is acceptable for one to pray on carpets or rugs. So you can pray on a carpet like I explained before. You can pray on a rug as well. Nothing wrong with this. Then moving on to the breaking the prayer. So it is permissible to break the ritual prayer, even an obligatory prayer. So it's permissible to break the prayer if one is being robbed of something worth 1 dirham or more. So if something is of value and you consider this to be of value, sorry, let me just get the charger. So if something is of value, then if you feel as though this is going to be robbed of you now, there's somebody who is stealing this, then breaking the prayer for this is permissible, even if it belongs to somebody else. A shepherd may also break the prayer out of fear of a wolf for his sheep. So the wolf are going to now get to his sheep. He can break the prayer for that reason too. Then it says it is mandatory, wajib, to break the ritual prayer if one hears a call for help from someone in an emergency, or if one fears with reasonable likelihood that a blind person will fall into a well or the like, meaning they'll fall into a pit or they'll fall into something which will then kill them or perhaps. So it's life risk. So if there is somebody's life at danger, then it will be mandatory for you to break your prayer. A midwife may delay her ritual prayer even until after the time expires. So even till after the time has expired, out of fear for the baby or the mother in delivery. So whilst she is delivering the baby, she fears that if I go to pray, then there's going to be life risk here. So she can delay the prayer there. The same ruling applies to a traveler who fears highway robbers. So there's highway robbers here. If I stop, then they're going to rob me. So I cannot stop. I have to carry on going. So you had to carry on traveling. By the time you get to your destination, then the prayer was already finished. You are excused from this. This is allowed because there is risk to one's property. There is risk to a person's life. So these are things that are permissible. Then the abandoning the prayer. One who abandons the ritual prayer altogether on purpose, out of laziness, is to be beaten until he bleeds. And this is obviously in a Muslim country. This is not talking about in a country where the Islam is not being governed through. So the government, the Muslim government, will obviously take this matter into their hands, and it will be an official thing. This will be an official punishment, a capital punishment that would be given in essence from the government themselves, that will give lashes, maybe 10, 20, how many lashes they say, on a person missing a prayer. The citizen who is Muslim who misses a prayer, there will be a punishment for it. So that's what he's talking about. And he says, and then imprisoned until he resumes praying. So if the person starts to bleed, then you don't beat them further. You just put them in prison. The same ruling applies to one who does not fast in Ramadan. So you're meant to fast, it's obligatory, you're not doing it. In a Muslim country, you can be then imprisoned or lashed. He is not killed, however, unless he denies the obligation of something obligatory or belittles it. Because if a person denies the obligation of something which is obligatory or belittles it, then they will come out of the fold of Islam. They will have to renew their Islam. And if they refuse to renew their Islam, then they are then apostate, and an apostate will then be given the suitable punishment. If it's a man, he will be killed, and if it's a woman, then she will be imprisoned for the rest of her life according to our school. Now moving on, praying on a riding animal. So it's obligatory, meaning the fard and mandatory wajib prayers, only these two prayers, are invalid if performed on a riding animal or in a vehicle. Nowadays, obviously in a vehicle, we'll be praying in a vehicle. As is a prostration of recital if the verse was recited or heard before mounting the animal, except in cases of necessity. So if a person was, let's just take a practical example, driving the car, and they heard the recital of prostration before they started driving the car, or they were a passenger on the car, so they recited it, or they heard that the ayat of sajda, the verse of prostration, then they are not allowed to do that sajda of prostration, the sajda of recital, should I say, the prostration of recital. So they're not allowed to do that whilst they are in the car. The only time you're allowed to do that is there's very much a necessity. So as for example, all the ground around you is so muddy, if you get out, you're going to get filthy. Or there's fear of the robber, the bandit again, if one were to descend or stop. Or inability to remount after descending. So if you come down, you're not going to be able to come back on, because people need to get you on, and you can't, there's nobody here to get you back on. So these are all examples of when there is a necessity, or when a person is allowed to do the sajda or the obligatory mandatory prayers on the actual ride, meaning nowadays in our concept, or in that context, it will be a car or a vehicle or any sort of vehicle. Ideally, a person should stop and perform these prayers, but if a person had the necessity, then they could have prayed. But generally speaking, you're not allowed to pray the obligatory and mandatory prayers in the car, in the vehicle. You should stop and pray there. Now, if a carriage on a camel is made stationary and connected to the ground by means of a wooden stick or the like, one may pray in it standing, as it takes the legal ruling of the ground. So as long as it is connected to the ground, then a person can pray on that carriage, or a person can pray on the carriage, on the carriage, on the camel. You can pray on the camel which is connected to the carriage and everything else. So you can do this. This is allowed. Now, if one is on a animal or a vehicle and outside city limits, he may pray voluntary prayers. So you're outside of the city limits, and you've not become a traveler yet, perhaps because you're not traveling, but you're outside of the city. So he may pray voluntary prayers, even emphasize sunnahs. So you can even pray the sunnahs by head movements. So meaning you can stay on the mode of transport, you can stay in your vehicle, in your car, and you can pray the sunnahs, you can pray nafils in your seat. So if you're in a coach ride, or if you're in a train, or even if you're in a car, you can actually pray the prayer, the nafil prayers or sunnah prayers in the car. So all you have to do is by moving one's head and moving the back when needed. So in such a case, any filth on the saddle or stirrups is excused. If there's any filth there on the animal, this is excused. So according to our school of thought, it is not valid to perform a ritual prayer whilst walking. So whilst you're walking, you can't pray, you have to stop. In general, for voluntary prayers, even if able to stand, one may pray sitting. So this is for voluntary prayers. You can pray sitting down, we talked about this, yet whilst facing the Qibla, both at the onset as well as in the middle of prayer. So you can sit from the onset of that nafil, of that voluntary prayer, or you can sit in the middle of that prayer. That's no problem. You can do this as well. Then it moves on. It says, if one prays obligatory or mandatory prayers in a ship while sitting, even without an excuse, it is valid. So even the obligatory or mandatory wajib prayers are allowed to be prayed on a ship sitting down. It is valid. Yet he must turn towards the Qibla every time it changes direction. So if I'm sitting on the ship and I'm facing the Qibla, but the ship turns, so I have to then turn to make sure I'm still facing the Qibla. So as the ship turns, I have to then make sure I turn to the direction to make sure I continue to face the Qibla. So facing Qibla is important, but sitting down is excused. And the reason for this is because of many people, when they stand, they will feel seasick, or they may start to become dizzy. So standing generally does that. So if a person's sitting, then there's more safety. They won't fall as well. If you're standing, you could fall. So these are all reasons as to why a person is allowed to sit down and pray. Now, it doesn't mention regarding sitting on an aeroplane. We'll just cover that as well because it's very relevant to us. So sitting in an aeroplane, meaning so praying on an aeroplane, a person should pray standing up. So anyone who is excused from standing up anyway, these rules will not apply, because then a person would obviously be allowed to sit down. But if a person is obligatory for that person to stand up and pray. So if you're standing up and praying normally, then you cannot pray the fard and wajib prayers sitting on the chair. That's not allowed. The ship is different, but on the plane is not. That same excuse doesn't apply, because on the plane, unless the seatbelt signs are on and they're going through a lot of turbulence or something, but otherwise generally speaking, it's quite safe to walk around, to stand up, and everything else on the aeroplane. So this is why you would just generally, what I would recommend people just generally to do is just walk. Don't ask if it's not a place or it's not an aeroplane which has facilities to pray in. Then you just simply allow the people who are stewarding the plane, allow them to go to the front to serve the people. Then you just walk towards the back of the plane, and you have plenty of space there on the right or the left, depending on which way the qibla will be for you. And you just pray your 2 rakats quickly. It won't take time. You don't take too long. You don't start praying your sunnahs and everything else. You just pray your fard that you need to pray. You make it short. So by the time you got up and you prayed, you've gone back, nobody will even know that you went to pray. So there will be no issue. If you start to ask, then it may become an issue. And for many people that ask, it becomes an issue. They say, oh, for health and safety, we can't let you block the fire exit, we can't let you stand here, and the rest of it. But you literally will be 2 minutes. So, you could pray very easily. Many people go to stand for the queue of the toilet, so they're allowed to stand for that. So you're standing as well, just quickly pray and just go back to your seat. That's the way I generally tell people, and I've, alhamdulillah, on all my journeys, I've always been able to do this. So this is the way to pray. If they obviously prevent you and there's no way that you can stand, then in order to make sure that the prayer time doesn't elapse, doesn't exit, because obviously whilst you're traveling, depending on which direction you're traveling in, the prayer times can become very short. So then you would just pray on your seat, and then when you come back down to ground again, for cautious purpose, just as a cautionary measure, just repeat that prayer when you're on the ground and you're standing up, because you missed the standing because of a human intervention. We talked about that previously, human preventing you from standing up. So you have to repeat that prayer. So that's the way of the aeroplane. The train, you could apply the ship if obviously on a train a person feels sick or it's dangerous to stand up. On a train, a person could probably apply the rulings of the ship to it. But if it's a cruising ship, a train, which obviously is safe for you to stand up in, normally people are standing up anyway, then the same rulings as the aeroplane will apply, whereby a person has to stand up and pray. So anyway, these are the rulings, practical rulings for praying whilst a person is traveling. So now comes the rulings for the prayer for the traveler. So the minimum period of travel whereby certain legal rulings take effect is 3 days on camel or by foot. So 3 days journey. Thus when a person has left his place of residence, so as soon as you leave the place of residence, intending to travel at a medium pace to a place that he will reach in at least 3 days, then he does not fast in Ramadan, meaning you don't need to fast. And he shortens the 4 rakat obligatory prayers, so you shorten the 4 rakats to make it into 2. He is not allowed to pray them as 4 rakats. So that's the difference between the fasting and the prayer shortening, which we call the qasr. So the fasting is a dispensation. You are allowed to still fast, but you don't have to fast. And the shortening of prayer is an obligation. You have to pray the shortening of the prayer. You have to pray 2. You cannot pray the 4. So that's our Hanafi madhab. So then it says, if he does pray the full 4 rakats, so if you do end up praying the full 4 rakats and sits in the first sitting between the second and the third rakat, so that first sitting you sat, because that first sitting in actual fact is your final sitting, because you're meant to have prayed 2. So because you've done that first sitting, your prayer is valid. Then the prayer will be valid, although he has committed a serious error. You've done something wrong because you've added 2 more rakats. Otherwise, it is invalid, meaning you've done a serious wrong, and you will have to do a prostration of forgetfulness, the prostration of mistake. You will have to still do that because you added 2 more rakats and you did not end the salat with salam. You meant to have ended the prayer after 2 rakats, but you didn't do that. You carried on praying 2 more rakats. Those 2 more rakats will count as a nafil according to us. And if you do a sajda sahwa at the end of those 4 rakats, the first 2 rakats will count as the fard. They will be perfectly fine, and you have made up for the problem that you had in your prayer. However, if a person does not sit in that second rakat, in that first sitting, you did not sit, and you forgot to sit and you stood all the way up, then the prayer will become invalid because you have missed an integral, the integral of the final sitting. The final sitting has not been done. Even though you sat on the fourth rakat, but that is not the final sitting. The final sitting would have been the second rakat sitting, and you haven't done that. So that's that ruling, so that's what it means, but otherwise it would be invalid. He may not shorten any prayer aside from the 4 rakat obligatory prayers. So any other prayers, even the sunnah prayers, or even the maghrib prayer or the witr prayer, none of these prayers can be shortened. The only prayer that can be shortened is the 4 rakat prayers, so namely the dhuhr, asr and isha prayers. So these are the only prayers that will be shortened. So these are the rulings here, and we will leave it till here for today. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So alhamdulillah, we've completed our session today. We started off going through the 32 disliked actions during prayer that the author mentions. Went through them fairly easy, very simple. Then he went through to mention the things that are permissible during prayer. So we went through, if a person should place a barrier, which is called a sutra. So a person should place this in front of them when they're praying. If they're praying in a congregation, the imam should put it in front of them, and then the congregation will not need a barrier, because the barrier that is placed for the imam is the barrier for the people, all the people. So you can then pass the people in front of them, in front of the whole big row, because the imam in the middle has a barrier. So passing in front of the barrier is perfectly fine when there's a barrier there. If there's no barrier, then we talked about how to pass this person to. Then we went on to talking about breaking the prayer. So when is a person allowed to break the prayer? And a person fears for their life, for their property, or for somebody else's property, or for their animal. There's fear of all these things, and a person is allowed to break the prayer. Also, if a person is calling for help and their life may be at risk, or they're going to be injured or something, then a person is allowed, obviously a person should mandatory wajib for a person to actually break the prayer. And we talked about the ruling of a midwife who's helping a woman deliver the baby. Then she's also allowed to delay the prayer, even if it means that the prayer becomes missed. So she is allowed to do that. Ideally, obviously, have 2 people there so they can pray in turns. At least 2 people, should we say. But anyway, then we talked about the grave implication of abandoning the prayer, that if it was a Islamic state, then the person would be given some sort of punishment. Either they would be given lashes or they would be imprisoned. But they will not be killed for abandoning prayer. Then we talked about praying on a riding animal, and we obviously match that onto praying in any sort of vehicle, and how a person should pray. Utmost best, a person should try to stand, but if a person cannot stand, then they can pray sitting down, depending on why they're sitting down. If a person sits on a ship or something because of sickness, or because it's dangerous to stand up because the boat is rocking everywhere, then a person can pray sitting down, facing Qibla, is all fine. The prayer is accepted. But if a person prays in an aeroplane, for example, sitting on the chair, sitting on the seat, because they're missing their integral of standing, then they will need to repeat that prayer. Otherwise, like I explained, go to the back of the plane and pray. Or if you're at the front of the plane, generally, then you have some space in front of your seats, then you can pray there too. And then we went through the few rulings of the prayer of a traveler. So the minimum distance that a person travels, whereby a person will become a traveler by, it mentioned, was 3 days. This correlates into 48 miles. You may hear a little bit of difference of opinion, but generally we say 48 miles which is 77 kilometers. And this much, if a person is intending to travel that much, so you intend to travel 77 kilometers or 48 miles, as soon as you leave your place of residence, as soon as you've left there, then you have now become a traveler, even though you haven't actually traveled the 48 miles. Because you're embarking on a journey which is going to be 48 miles or more, as soon as you leave your locality, you have now, so if you're living in a town, you leave your town, the borders of your town. If you're living in a city, then you leave the city boundaries. But if you live in a big city like London, we generally say the ruling of boroughs. So there are smaller boroughs within the actual London. So we count boroughs as the boundary, because this is more like a self-contained borough which has its own town hall, it has its own police force, it has its own, things like this. So because it has its own council even, so it's self-contained, the borough. So this is why this is like a city, and when you leave that borough, you have now left the place of residence, the outskirts of the place of residence, and you can start to do the qasr, you can start to shorten the prayer. And likewise, if you've left this area before the start of the fast, which is Subha Sadiq, the crack of dawn, you've left that area already, you're already a traveler, then you can also miss that fast. You don't have to fast that, but then you have to make up for that fast later on. Likewise, that's the ruling. So this is the rulings for the traveler. I've just added a few details here because we didn't have time to add it in the actual recording. Hopefully these things all make sense.